Hi friends, welcome to another video. In this video, we are going to talk about a service called as Azure Bastion. So this service is part of connectivity options to Azure virtual machines. So if you want to connect to an Azure virtual machine, what are the different options available to you? One of the options available to you is Azure Bastion. Now, when I talk about Azure Bastion service, it basically provides a remote connectivity to your machines by using the Azure portal. So you either leverage RDP or SSH to connect to your VMs, and all of these connections happen over TLS sessions. So you have to log into the Azure portal. After you log into the Azure portal, you have the opportunity to connect to your Windows or Linux machines by using this PaaS offering from Microsoft. So it is a platform as a service offering. You don't need to worry about hardening this VM. You don't need to worry about management of this VM as well. Microsoft takes care of the management of this VM as well. So in on-premises, if you remember, we used to use jump servers. Some people call it Bastion, some people call it jump servers. This is exactly the same service, but it is part of cloud. Now, this Bastion service provides connectivity to your virtual machines within the same virtual network, or it also provides you connectivity with VMs, which are peered to your virtual network. So it doesn't matter if your VM is part of the same network or it is peered to the network. It allows you to connect to both the networks using this. So you can connect to the VMs or peered network from Azure portal directly. There is also a new feature called shareable links, which you can use to also connect to these VMs without even logging into the Azure portal. So that is another feature which has recently been introduced. Now, if you want to understand the overall architecture, let's first look at the different connectivity options. So when I talk about connectivity options to VM, either we can use RDP, we can use SSH. RDP is your remote desktop protocol that we leverage on Windows VMs. SSH is for your Linux workloads or secure shell protocol, and Bastion supports both these offerings. So Bastion is a managed service from Microsoft. Now, if you want to understand the overall architecture of Bastion, you can just look at this diagram. So if you see this, over here, you have a user. This user is trying to connect to your backend VM. Let's say this VM. This is a Windows VM, and this user wants to connect to this Windows VM. Let's look at the workflow of how this user is going to connect to your backend VM. So this user logs into the Azure portal, and after they are logged in, they basically use their Azure Active Directory identity, and all the security features with Azure Active Directory are also implemented on their identity. This TLS session is forwarded from the portal to the public IP address of your Azure Bastion service. So your Azure Bastion service will have a public IP, will also have a private IP over here. Also, there will be some load balancers and other offerings in the backend. Those offerings will then connect to either of the plans. So you have two plans available in Bastion. Either you can go with the basic plan or you can go with the standard plan. In basic plan, you don't get too many features. We'll see a comparison chart of the features as well. So in basic plan, you get up to 2 VMs available to you. In case of standard plan, I can have up to 50 VMs assigned to me. So if too many people are connecting from this side, you can have standard plan selected, and all the features which are available with standard plan will also be available to you if you go with this. Obviously, there will be pricing difference in these plans. So you go from a public IP, any plan you choose, you will get either 2 VMs or up to 50 VMs based on the options that you've selected. From this public IP, this is translated to a private IP of Bastion. Once this translation is done, this private IP of the Bastion is then used to connect to RDP for Windows machines. So it uses the default port 3389 to connect to this Windows machine. It can also connect to a Linux machine or a Ubuntu machine based on the operating system that you're using. If let's say this network that you're using is peered to another network. So if you see this diagram, you have a peering connection or virtual network peering connection created over here. If these networks are connected to each other by using peering, you can also connect from, or this user can also get connected from this Bastion host to this peer network, and they can access this VM as well. So if you use Bastion service, it allows you to also configure connectivity over this peering connection as well. So this is the overall architecture that you see for Bastion. Not just this network, you can also connect to on-premises. So you can connect to on-premises, but you require a standard plan for that. So if you have a site-to-site connection or a point-to-site connection or some kind of connection configured, so if you have a VPN connection configured, you can also connect from this Bastion host to a on-premises VM as well. That is also possible. Okay. Now, what is the difference between standard plan versus the basic plan? These are the major differences that you see with basic SKU versus standard SKU. If I go with basic SKU, it allows you to connect to Windows VMs in peer network. This is available in both the tiers. You can connect to Linux VMs using private key stored in Azure Key Vault. That is possible for both the tiers. Connection to Windows and Linux machines over SSH and RDP is also possible in both the tiers. Kerberos authentication and audio output. Audio output basically means you're able to hear some audio playing from your VM over the Bastion connection. So all these options are by default available to you, whether you choose basic plan or you go with the standard plan. Then there are other options which are not supported in basic plan. For example, shareable links you can't create. So you can't connect you can't connect to VMs outside of the Azure portal in case of basic plan. But with shareable links, you can connect to VMs outside of the Azure portal if you go for standard plan. Connections to VMs using native clients, that is using CLI to connect to your Windows and Linux machines, is not possible in case of basic plan. You can connect to VMs via IP address, that is connectivity to on-premises VMs or any other VMs is only possible in standard plan. Host scaling, so if you want to scale or add multiple VMs up to 50 VMs is only possible in case of standard SKU. Similarly, you see a lot more features which are available to you, which are only available in case of standard SKU and not in case of basic plan. Now, in order to understand, let's see where you deploy your Bastion host. So if I go to the Azure portal and if I go to my VMs, on my VM, I can go to any of my VMs. And over here, I have the opportunity to create connections to my VM. One of the options is I either download a RDP file and I connect to my VM using that RDP file. The other option is I use secure shell protocol if my workload is not Windows, but it is Linux. Or the third option is I use Bastion. When I use Bastion, I get the opportunity to create a Bastion with the default settings. So if you see, you can create the Bastion host with the default settings, or I have the opportunity to configure Bastion manually. Usually, if you want to control a lot of things, you will configure it manually. You're not going to deploy it from this option. With default option, it is just easy for you to deploy. You don't have to configure too many things. So this is the simplest option to go for. But if you want to control a lot of settings, you go with the configure manually option. So once I select configure manually, it gives me all the details I have to modify to create the Bastion. The first thing is you provide the name of your Bastion. So you select your subscription and resource group and you provide the name of your Bastion service, Bastion 01. Now you select the region in which you want to deploy your Bastion. So if my VMs are part of East US, I will deploy it in the same region as well. Then you select the tier. If I select the basic plan, I only get 2 VMs assigned to me. I don't have any more VMs that I can deploy in this. But if I go with standard plan, I get this slider where I can add more instances. So depending on my needs, I can add up to 50 instances on this VM. Okay. So whenever you're creating these Bastion hosts, you should also make sure your subnet should be /26 or larger. Why do you want such large addresses? Because you want to deploy these Bastion hosts and it will require quite a few IPs available to you. So if you go with /24, you get 251 IPs available to you. With /25, you get around 123 IPs. With /26, you get around 64 minus 5, which is 59 IPs. So you get around these many IPs available to you when you go with these options. Okay, so you get around 59 IPs if I go with /26. Because there are 50 VMs that will be deployed in the backend, they will also require some IPs. So you should always plan this IP configuration. Then you select the network in which you want to deploy it. You have to select an appropriate resource group where your network is deployed. And you can also configure a public IP address over here. So you either create a new network or you define a public IP over here and you configure these settings. After you have configured it, you can also go to advanced options. And within advanced option, you see quite a few features available to you. So if you want to understand these features, there is a direct link available to you, but I'll just quickly tell you about these features. Copy paste is basically you are able to copy paste into the Bastion. So you copy any data from your local machine and you're able to paste it via Bastion to the machine that you're connecting to. IP-based connection basically means if I want to connect to on-premises machine over site-to-site VPN or express route connections, I can configure that. Kerberos authentication, if I want to go with Kerberos authentication option, that is also available to you. Native client support, it means if I want to connect from my remote machine over CLI, command line interface, I want to configure RDP or SSH session over CLI, I can do that. Also, you have another option called shareable links. By default, you have to log into your Azure portal. Only then you are able to connect to your machines in cloud. But if you choose this shareable link option available to you, this allows you to connect to your VMs without basically logging into your virtual machine. So this is a new offering available to you. Now, once I click on review create and create this Bastion will be deployed for me. I've already created it, so I'm not deploying it again. Once you have deployed your Bastion, you can go to your machine and you can go to connect and you go to your Bastion. Now on my Bastion, I have the option to connect by using this password. Or the other option is I click on password from key vault. I can store my passwords in key vault and I connect to my Bastion host or my backend VM using those passwords. So if I go to connect from key vault, I have to select my key vault and I have to select the key that I've created. So I had already created this secret before and I am just using that secret in order to connect to my machine. Once I do this, I click on connect and it basically launches a browser session for me. As soon as it launches a browser session, you can see this is a secure connection. And using this secure connection, I am able to connect to my backend VM. Once you're connected to your backend VM, you can basically do any activity. So I can just close this. I can maybe go to server manager, change some settings over here. So I can do all the activities that I usually do. With standard plan, you also get the opportunity to copy paste the data as well. With basic, you don't get that. Now, if I go back over here, so this is my basic plan created. If I click on this Bastion service, you see in my basic plan, this is not the basic one, but I had a basic plan earlier. In the basic plan, you will not see all these options. Let me see. I had a VM where we had a basic plan. So if I go to this Windows VM, over here, you'll see that my Bastion, I think it has a basic plan. So if I show you the basic plan, okay, I think both of them are standard plans, but if you have a basic plan, you will not see these session or shareable link options available to you. Now, once you go to this connection options, but before I go to this connection option, let me show you the configuration. When you go to configuration, if you have configured Kerberos authentication, copy paste option, native client support, IP based connection, or shareable link connections, only then you will get those features. If you're on a basic plan, you can always upgrade to the standard plan, but going from standard to basic is not allowed. So that's not permitted. Okay, so you can see downgrading it in Bastion is not permitted. Now what I can do, I can go to my sessions and over here I can see all of my active sessions. If I want to monitor all my sessions, I can do so from here. Okay. Similarly, you can see if you want to delete a session, you can also delete a session directly from here. Then I have shareable link option available to me. If I don't want to connect to my VMs over the Azure portal, I can add my VM and over here I select my resource group and my VM. So your VM should be in the same network or connected via peering to create a shareable connection. So you select your VM and you click on apply. Once you do this, a shareable link is created for you. Now, instead of me logging into the VM, I can just copy this link and using this link, I will be able to RDP or SSH into my workloads. So you copy this link over here and once you copy And over here, I can provide my username and password, and I can log into my account. Okay, so this is your shareable link option. Similarly, if you go to connect option, over here you will see that you provide the IP address of your on-premises machine, and if it is connected via site-to-site connection or by using express route connection, you will be able to connect to that VM from here by just providing the IP address. You define the RDP port you want to connect on, and you define the username and password. This password can also be stored on your key vault as well. So all these options are available to you when you configure Bastion. Okay, so that's all what I wanted to discuss related to Bastion. Hope to see you in the next video.